introduce to you the man of the hour,
Tony.
Hello and welcome back to At the Gates. I am Tony, your host, and I am outside of Gate 34 at Target Field in monochromatic Minneapolis, Minnesota. The date, September 24th, 2015. The competitors, the Minnesota Twins, who host the Cleveland Squad. Indians love cricket. Native Americans aren't mascots. Today's guest is...
Your co-host, Ron Burgundy.
That is Paulie Shore, a.k.a. Paul Com, buddy. All right, Paul is the first repeat guest and now takes a commanding 3-1 lead over Mateo, Nate, and Greg. So, is there anyone that you'd like to thank that made this all possible?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank my parents. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wouldn't be for them. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
He is kind of a big deal. He even has proof on Twitter. It may have been retweeted by the, I don't know, the Twitter page that is this podcast, whatever it is. All right, so I'm going to welcome back Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Tony. It's been a while.
It's been a really long time. It's been a whole week. And last time we had Greg, but that loser's gone, and he only stuck around for one game.
It's more exciting without him, anyways.
It is, because he puts up small totals, and he's just a bunch of big talk, I think.
I mean, who really needs him? I mean, Tony and I we'll find something to do.
We're basically best buds, and we probably don't even need Mateo at this point, wouldn't you say?
There's a certain time when Mateo can come in. But right now, I think Tony and I, at this current moment in time where it's 4:14, I think we're all right at the moment here.
Plus, it'd be weird because we're doing this on one phone. We don't have microphones or anything, so having a third person would just be tougher to pass it around to, really.
Three ways are always weird.
I'm going to isolate that, and that might be the promo for this wonderful podcast, especially coming off of that topic. That was, well, we're well beyond that at this point, I guess. And going back to something that not as serious, but just sad, the passing of Yogi Berra. Paul, do you have a favorite yogiism? I have a few that I'm going to wait until the end of the podcast to end it on, but do you have any that come to mind right away?
Well, when you get to the fork in the road, you should probably take it.
Ooh, I think you're going to hear that one again pretty much right at the end of the podcast, but it's a good one. I really like that. The other question that I had, and this kind of goes along with how I thought when I was a kid too, were you confused as a kid when you learned that Yogi Berra and Yogi the Bear were two separate entities?
Well, now that I think about it, driving through the Dells on the interstate there, it makes a lot more sense now, because when you look up on the hill, there's Yogi Bear, not Yogi Berra.
Yeah, although it would have been pretty sweet because maybe we could have ball hawked at the Dells.
There's a possibility there.
Then again, he probably would have been like in his 80s when you drove by, and he probably couldn't throw it that far, especially to the freeway. So, Yogi being one of the best who ever was to wear a number between 0 and 10 kind of had me thinking, who's the best of the best for each of those numbers? And what I did was take a look at Baseball Reference and kind of sort by wins above replacement for each of the numbers. And a few times I picked someone who was maybe second place, but that's just because it was really close. And I went with someone who maybe played less years but had a higher WAR per year, or someone that I just thought was instrumental to that game. So without going into my further stats and getting into the nitty-gritty, let's just do 0 through 10. Number 0, Al Oliver, who wore that number for 8 years. There's not a lot of number zeros. And in fact, when I was playing hockey, I really wanted to be number 00, but I never got it, just because I thought it was pretty sweet. So, would you ever wear the number 0?
I don't think I could live up to 0.
That's true. It's pretty high. I mean, yeah.
There's not much above it, It's just kind of a dead-end number where if you get it, then you're at the top already.
And really, it's a circle, so it's like infinite. It's weird. This is going deep. Number 1, Ozzie Smith, who wore that number for 19 years, and he just barely beats it out because originally when I thought of number 1, I thought of Tsuyoshi Nishioka, who used to play for the Twins. But Ozzie Smith beat him slightly. I was surprised when I looked at the numbers, but it was pretty close. But Ozzie Smith takes number 1. Number 2, a guy that I think we both saw last year. Number 2 being
Derek Jeter.
Derek Jeter,
who just barely beat out Brian Dozier.
That's true. Although Brian Dozier at this point has only been wearing that a couple years, and how long was he wearing number 20? At least 1 year, maybe 2?
Probably.
So it's pretty close to 50-50 at this point. Who knows? Maybe he goes back. And Derek Jeter wore that number for 20 years. Then number 3, a guy who wore it for only 7 years, Babe Ruth. And the reason why he only wore it for 7 years is because he played at a time when early in his career they didn't have numbers. The other guy that was pretty close that wore it more years, but still, how are you going to beat the Babe, would be Jimmy Fox. Number 4, another Yankee, 3 in a row here, Lou Gehrig, who wore it for 11 years. Number 5, I went with someone still playing the game because he has a higher WAR than the guy who I thought was in second place. Number 5 is Albert Pujols, beating out George Brett, who had it for 19 years. Number 6, Stan the Man Musial, who wore it for 22 years. And number 7 is Joe... No, there's no way it's Joe Mauer. But I can tell you that he placed 5th. Number 7 is another Yankee again, Mickey Mantle, who wore it for 18 years. And like I said, Joe Mauer was 5th. And in between those two, I put at second place Ivan Pudge Rodriguez, who was really, really good. Number 3, Kenny Lofton. And it's a shame that he's no longer on the ballot. He's one of those borderline Hall of Famers that really should have gotten another look. During a time of power, he was a man of speed, so that probably hurts him. But at the same time, those guys of power a lot of times were linked to PEDs, and they're being held out of the Hall of Fame. So maybe the voters got it wrong. Number 4 would be Craig Biggio. And number 5, like I said, Joey Mauer. All right. The best guy to wear number 8 would be Cal Ripken, who wore that for 21 years. Second place would be Carl Yastrzemski, who wore it for 23 years. Third place I had as, Gary Carter, a catcher just like Yogi Berra, who just beat out fourth place for wearing number 8, Yogi Berra. Best number 9, Ted Williams, wore it for 19 years. Best number 10 would be Lefty Grove. He wore it for 10 years, and also 7 years of his career were no number. The other guy that I thought of that actually wore it for nearly his entire career, other than the first 10 games of his career or whatever, when he was a rookie, would be Chipper Jones. He was pretty darn good. Paul, did you see the Twins Dance Awards?
I did, and I think the best all-around dancer award did go fairly to Shane Robinson.
Yeah, you like Shane?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I thought it was pretty sweet that my elementary self shared a similar award with my favorite player, Trevor Plouffe, and that was perfect attendance. I mean, you can't even start to say that you're a master if you didn't attend every day. It's just like practice, practice, practice. He's winning basically the practice award.
You're basically the same person now.
I mean, I do have his batting gloves, and his DNA is in there, so I could just tie that DNA to mine and then become a professional baseball player. Sounds legit. Let's talk about something that we talk about every podcast, and that is playoffs. First of all, congrats to the Pirates, who made it for the 3rd straight year. They had many years of losing, so I'm sure that this feels really good to finally be a winner and actually do it on a consistent basis. This actually ties a club record for most playoff appearances in a row, tying them with the 1970 through 72 team, as well as the 1990 through 92 team, which had a little guy named Barry Bonds before he went all roided and over to the Giants. Paul, do you think that there's going to be a game 163 in the AL?
I'm sure between someone. I doubt it would be between the Twins, because their last 5-5 games have not been so hot. I know they've won a couple in a row now, but
Houston hasn't been so hot either, so it's going to be tough. But the sucky part is that you have the Angels still hanging in there, and you also have the Rangers, who haven't just run away since taking it from the Astros. So potentially you could see 4 teams trying to go for 2 spots, and if you have a tie for that division, as well as one of those or those 2 teams tying with one of the last wild card teams, you're going to see a really messy 3-way tie that could potentially be at least 2 extra games to someone's season. Now I'm going to flip it over to Paul, who is going to be quizzing me about Houston, because I just went. So basically, what questions do you have for me at this time, Paul?
well, first of all, I just want you to give all the listeners here just a little backstory of what you did this last weekend in Houston.
All right. So on Thursday, I attended a game here. That's evident in the podcast. And then right away, I went home, got home at about a little bit before midnight, tried to get some sleep, got up at 5:30, left at 6 on Friday, basically got down there in Houston at midnight, and then woke up the next day, went to a record store to kick things off, and then waited at the gates for about, I think it was 4 hours, plus 2.5 hours of early entry once the gates were open. So I showed up almost 7 hours before the game.
All right, so when you said you went to visit our neighbors in the south, I guess you weren't talking about Mexico. What was your first impression of Minute Maid Park?
My first impression was quite poor, because the first impression would have to be with the parking. Parking around here is really nice because we have these things called meters that take credit cards. Down there, they have some, but those meters weren't working. And then they also had something where you put money in a slot and hope like hell that you parked correctly, even though you don't get a slip and it tells you that you should have a slip. So I didn't want to get my car towed. But once I actually saw the stadium itself, when I peeked at it through like the little gates there, I was in awe. And when I finally went in there, the first impression was, my God, this is massive.
So in ball talking terms, between Minute Maid Park and Target Field, we know Target Field is more of a toss-up ballpark. How would you compare Minute Maid Park as ball hawking terms to batted balls or toss-ups?
I think it's going to be good for both. You're going to have a little bit better time getting batted balls there. Obviously not in center field because it's a massive center field, but when I was in their right field area, there were a lot of guys putting them out. Even the right-handers were reaching the wall, and that was really sweet. I didn't try the left field side just because it was higher and I didn't know, and it was more compact because there's a narrow section, and then all of a sudden you have the wall, and a lot of guys can hit it over that, basically over the train area, and I had no clue where those balls went.
Comparing it to Target Field, which parts of Target Field or which parts of Minute Maid Park are better or worse? So, like comparing left field to left field, right field to right field, dugout to dugout, anything. Just, you don't have to give us a whole overview, but what's something that stood out?
The thing that I liked is actually the outfields were switched. I thought that Minute Maid had an easier right field, where Target Field is a little bit better in left field. Behind the dugouts, I noticed that a lot of fans, they're obviously Astros fans, so they go to the Astros side, but not a lot of people go over to the visiting side. And it's not a moat, so it's one big section from basically the concourse down, whereas at Target Field, you have that moat area, so it kind of splits it between like Section 6 and then Section 106. I like that it was just one section, and the fact that there were no visiting people meant that you could basically get a lot of toss-ups from the visitors.
So I haven't gotten a chance to check yet. I'm not sure if you put your blog up. How did you do ball hawking?
The blog is up, and ended up getting 9 that day, so not too bad for a first time, including one gamer that had the the commemorative logo, so that was really nice to keep that streak alive, as well as just get a commemorative at the place that it's commemorating. Yeah, it was really fun. I even got one from former twin Danny Valencia, which, all right, I guess.
Just a couple more things, because growing up looking at Houston and their ballpark, I've always noticed the train, Tal's Hill in center field, and obviously their massive roof. What did you think about these things? Did you get to see the train moving? Did you see anyone run up Tal's Hill, and was the roof open or closed?
The roof was closed when I got, or open when I got there, and then closed by the time that they opened gates, and I got to see it move, and it was pretty unexciting, but yet exciting at the same time. I mean, it travels like 10 miles an hour, so really slow, but it was still kind of cool to see in action. Tal's Hill, no one really ran up it. A few games later, Carlos Correa hit one that should have been a home run. It was like 433 feet and still only hit the hill. But that was actually the feature that brought me out there. I like the weird quirk, and I'm going to be sad to see it go, but got to take a picture of it. And as far as the train moving, I did get to see it move, and that was Evan Gattis, who hit a home run, a 3-run homer that eventually was the deciding runs in the game. They won 10-6.
That's all I have here. I'm sure Tony would move to Houston in a heartbeat if it was just set on ball hawking.
True. And I think Angel and I would have a fun competition out there. He does quite well, and next time I'm down there, I want to see you, and I want to see how you do it and compare results and just have a good time. Sticking with the ball hawking thing now, I had these questions thought up of, and they're just hypothetical scenarios at this point because we can't time travel, unfortunately. But if you could ball hawk with one celebrity, who would it be?
I'm going to go with my favorite comedian, John Mulaney, because if I made a good catch, I'm sure he'd think of some way to diss me over it. Then again, if I screwed up, I would not hear the end of it. He's really funny, he's impromptu, and he can make things just a hell of a lot funnier.
I would agree with that, and especially he kind of makes fun of himself for kind of looking a little bit feminine and being a little bit feminine. So, I mean, if he can really work it, girls get more toss-ups. You might be able to have him work it and get you those toss-ups by him showing a little bit of something. For me, I think I would actually, I narrowed it down to two people, and in this scenario, if I'm ball hawking at Target Field, I would want to go with Craig Finn, the lead singer and guitarist of the Hold Steady, and he also has his solo stuff, and he used to be in Lifter Puller, which is one of my favorite local bands of all time. But if it was somewhere nationally, I would stick with the comedian route and go with Will Ferrell, because he would definitely get attention. The players would probably throw a lot of balls at him, and also I just really want to meet him. He would be cool to actually interact with. Nick Batters, I hate you for starring in his movie with him. The other question is, if you could ball hawk in one old stadium that no longer exists, what would it be?
Definitely going to go with County Stadium here because of their just massive outfield seating. There's a ton of opportunity there. The bleachers go all the way around, so like compared to Target Field, you have a little bit in left field and then a little bit in right field, nothing in between, and there's just a lot more to work with there.
Which is good news because with all those neutrinos that it takes to time travel, you wouldn't have to time travel too far back in the future, so you could do it with like 5 neutrinos or something. I don't know the units, but sounds about right. Mine, I'd have to go back a lot earlier to a stadium that wasn't even around in my lifetime, but I've seen awesome pictures and the layout of it just looks awesome. That being Polo Grounds. It came down to Polo Grounds versus Crosley Field, but I mean, Polo Grounds, you could play the corners, which were under 300 feet. In fact, in right field, it was 258 feet. But then again, in dead center, it was 483 feet. So, I mean, it almost doubles. It's the wonkiest looking thing. It's more like a football stadium because it's long and narrow, but it would be awesome. I don't know. Like, we're never going to see another stadium that looks like that. So I want to go back then and do that. Also, if we could time travel, what would be the one game that you would want to snag a ball at any point in time?
You go first. I have to think about this.
For me, it's Game 7 of the 1991 World Series because how awesome would it be to get a World Series baseball as well as, I don't know, see the Twins actually win one and at home. That to me just like would be a dream come true. Yeah, I've seen the game numerous times. I remember watching it when I was a kid, plus I've bought the DVD, so it'd be cool to then be able to point myself out on camera even if I'm a little speck. If I had a backup, I'd travel to Game 6 and maybe sit in the seat where Puckett hit his home run, but I'm not that greedy. I'll just take Game 7.
I'm going to go back a little bit further than that to Mickey Mantle's first home run. I don't know the date, but that would be very, very worthwhile. I know
you wouldn't want to catch it, right? You'd let someone else catch it, but you'd just watch it.
Of course, but if I would catch it, I would not give it back. I know back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I know he overlapped at the end of the 30s, early 40s, but back then you were supposed to give the ball back, and if you didn't, then you could get in trouble. They'd try to offer you money for the ball or other things, but if you didn't, then you'd probably get kicked out eventually. But I'd just take it and run.
Or, I mean, if you time traveled again and went miraculously back to the future, even if you got a Mickey Mantle bat that was signed by him, that would be a lot of money. Not saying that you'd sell it just like the ball, but either way, it's really expensive.
Well, if I went back in time to start with, I would sell it, yes.
Okay. The other thing is, since we ball hawk and have these illusions in our head and celebrate internally, how nice would it be if we could celebrate externally and have basically the equivalent of walk-up music be played every time we caught the ball? For me, if I could do it, the song that I would want to play would be a band. It's a Dutch jazz band, Dead Neanderthals, Prime. The opening 30 seconds, it would scare it would frighten people and grab their attention. It's really triumphant and very chaotic. It would be awesome. The backup song that I would have is much different. Circle of Life from The Lion King, because then when I kind of like came up with the ball, I could raise it just like Simba got raised by that monkey. But what would you pick, Paul?
Let's move on, and at the end I'll come back to this.
Okay. So, as the season winds down, what plans do you have for 2016? I would recap 2015 here, but we're not done with it, and that's more of like our last game of the year. But what do you have on tap for 2016?
It ultimately depends on where I go off to school next year. I am in my first year of college, and I'm going to transfer because I have enough credits done. If I transfer up to the University of Minnesota, I'll be up here a lot more in the spring and the fall, that is. If I go somewhere else, if it's not around baseball, then I'll only be hitting the games in the summer. But we will see, because I won't know for a few more months here.
It might be cool to have like a second baseball home away from home. You were talking about before, like last year, maybe Arizona or something. It'd actually be really cool if you could go somewhere like that to have like a totally different experience than Target Field. Some of the stadiums I have on my wish list, one that I wanted to go to this year but it just didn't work out, would be Busch. The other one that I haven't ball hawked at yet is Miller, of all places. I mean, we all know people over there. It's not the best, but it would just be nice to finally cross that off the list and grab a ball there. Although maybe I'll just wait until they have a commemorative and give myself a real good reason to go over. And then possibly, depending on how it works out, I might be switching the annual spring training trip for a trip out to the West Coast and doing like an LA trip, which I've never been to California yet. So I'd hit probably both LA stadiums and then try to get down to either San Diego or maybe all the way up to the Bay, but we'll see. Well, the show ain't over till it's over. And now it's over. Nope.
I'm going to definitely go with Jump Around for my ball song, because every time I get a ball, then, you can just jump around. Just jump around.
For more, visit ploofsnewhairdo.mlblogs.com or atthegates.libsyn.com. You can also download it on iTunes just use the keywords @thegates. And also, please be sure to leave a review. You can also follow us on Instagram, and the name is at the Gates Podcast, all one word, or on Twitter, the @ symbol, the Gates Podcast. And thank you. Remember, when you hit a fork in the road, you gotta take it.